Thank you for joining us today. Getting the house in order, practical guidance to optimize your organization's approach to CLM in the age of AI will begin shortly. For the best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary programs or browsers. Clear your browser cache and make sure you have a strong internet connection. Before the presentation begins, please be aware the audio for this webcast is through the internet only. Use headphones or listen to this presentation through your laptop or mobile speakers. This is a one-way communication channel. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A widget. If you look around your screen, there are multiple widgets for your use. The first you'll see is Help, which can help you if you have any audio issues or slides aren't advancing. The Slides widget displays the PowerPoint presentation. This in all windows can be customized and resized to your preference. You can use the Q&A widget to type in any content-related questions, and we'll do our best to answer them in the Q&A during the presentation. To learn more about today's presenters, click the speaker bio. Resources provides handouts and supplemental material on today's topic, and survey questions are available during the webcast. Please fill out the survey completely to submit. I'm now pleased to hand the presentation over to Lucy.
Thank you so much, and so great to have those of you who have joined us live and those who are going to be watching afterwards. Fantastic. Those of you who are live, please do use that Q&A box. We don't have an unbearably large number of people, so it is going to be a great way for us to interact with you, and we'll be monitoring the questions for sure. This is a hot topic. We'll have some hot takes. We might have some unpopular opinions, and we want to hear your thoughts and questions as well. So please, let's make it as interactive as possible. CLM plus AI today is the short description of this topic, and CLM has become a bit of a three-letter word. We'll talk about why we think that is, and we'll certainly talk about what AI has done to this topic. But first, just a quick introduction of who we are and why we are so excited to talk about this, and why we hope we have something interesting to say to you all. I'm the founder of a niche consultancy called InnoLaw Group. After almost 14 years in-house at both Microsoft and Snowflake, I'm a contracts lawyer, and realized contracting can and should be done a little bit more efficiently. Through my time there, I transformed how we did our contracting at Microsoft on a global scale, and then set out to found this small niche consultancy that focuses on all things commercial contracting efficiencies, automation obviously being at the top of that list. And with me, I have Laura Trope, and I was lucky enough to find Laura and grab her. Laura, tell us a little bit about your background as well, please.
Sure. So I have a background in all things legal and all things contracting. Started my career out in M&A and then went in-house to be a commercial contracting lawyer for a couple of years. Went back to law firms to try and encourage good operations and good contracting hygiene as a knowledge management and innovation lawyer. And then took a little walk on the wild side, building some legal tech in a startup for a couple of years, and then brought all those package of odd skills, which happened to be useful as a package, to our consultancy, and have been working here for 4+ years, helping in-house teams figure out their contracting problems. So that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And in the world of legal tech and tech in general, 4+ years is a lifetime. And I think we have all felt really the change, that the tide has changed. So we want to set a little bit of context. For starters, we're going to share our insights, what we are seeing and what we are hearing, what we've learned through a painstakingly taken on task of running our own study on the market. And then we'll get into a lot of the more practical, pragmatic tips that we have on really how you can tackle this and how you can approach this in a methodical way, so that you aren't a little confused or overwhelmed potentially by what's going on out there. So a couple of things that we are hearing. We've got a couple of quotes here. These are 100% real quotes. You know, there is right now a bit of a confusion of which direction to go when it comes to contract automation. And we're going to refer to contract automation as a very general, broad set of kind of an umbrella to all of the technologies that we see that are claiming to or purposefully driving to make contracting more efficient. Contracting, meaning everything from the process and the workflow to how contracts run across a company or an enterprise, to what goes on inside the four corners of the document itself. And there are different angles to using technology that are really quite new. It's a quite new and fresh way of looking at contracting automation that is certainly different than what those of us who've been around for a while saw, let's say, pre-COVID times. That was kind of one era, I would say, of contracting automation. I think post-COVID, we had a slightly different one where there was a real explosion of investment that was happening into the CLM market, all the different CLM companies. And then I would say the next era is the one we're in now. And that one was brought on to us by the explosion, of course, of AI about 2.5 years ago now. And nothing's looked the same since. And it changes literally daily. That's certainly how we feel. And our job is to stay on top of it, which is becoming nearly impossible. So if we're having a tough time staying on top of it, it is no wonder that corporate law department leaders and practitioners are also having a tough time. So why is it right now feeling a little overwhelming? The choices really feel unlimited. It feels like there is no end to the number of options that you have right now to pick from when you are looking for technology to help contracting become smoother or more efficient. And it's kind of true. The choices are in many ways actually unlimited because of the way that AI plays a role right directly on your laptop and then the day job that you have, to how AI is now underneath and inside of many of the technologies you have, and the variations of how you can combine. We started an annual study a few years ago, and we had a very important part of it, which was our index. Again, we are not in the research business, but we couldn't help ourselves, and we saw a real need for an unbiased report, meaning we don't have CLM or contract automation technology of our own, and we don't align with any particular solution providers. Our job is to know as many of them as we possibly can and to have an opinion. So we're agnostic but opinionated. And so we had this index, which was hard enough to keep up with. And I think one year we had capped it at 100, and I can't remember if the next year we were well over 200. Laura, do we remember the numbers of how that exponential leap happened in 1 year?
Into the hundreds, but safe to say the challenging part was not necessarily the numbers, but how one defines it, which is what you're driving at. It's become a multi-headed hydra that is can be defined in many ways. So into the hundreds for sure.
Perfect. Well, let's start with this. So, and the short story, by the way, on the hundreds is we actually stopped in this year's report. So those of you who have the downloads, I think right on your screen, you can grab our annual market study that just came out this past December. And we decided, you know what, we actually aren't even going to try to keep a list. It really isn't actually helpful for you all, and we're going to consider you all as kind of the buyers here, or the ones who are out there shopping for technology. It really stopped being helpful to list out company names and products and solutions. And we thought what was more helpful is to really create some framework and some approach for you all to use when you're out there assessing the right technologies for you. But Laura, if I could turn to you for a minute here, just a little bit about the perception of the CLM and AI and the definition challenge we're having right now.
Yeah, so again, we've kind of had to reframe these things ourselves, not because AI is in any way new. It's been around for years and years, and you've all been using it in some way, shape, or form within your contracting process and other systems for ages, but just the new possibilities and the way that it has impacted what is possible in terms of contracting has also caused what we know to be traditional CLM product terminology to be reevaluated and redefined. And so we're seeing it become a little harder and harder to figure out what we mean by what is in that CLM bucket. We obviously have our traditional players that most people are aware of, but then there are adjacent and above and below and inside of and together with hundreds and hundreds of choices. And as we know, aside from that, we have our general AI tools who are now entering the fray with legal features that are now also blurring the lines further. So when we think about CLM and AI as a concept, I think we think about more as understanding what contracting is for you and how automation can help you make certain parts of that process more efficient, rather than, we're looking definitions of your process outwards to technology, rather than trying to force technology into your processes at, in the boxes that you're used to receiving them in. So yes, definitely a blurring of things, but contract automation as a category doesn't have such neat terminology around it anymore.
Right. So what we've done, we try to really orient people around the things that never change, and that is a contracting life cycle, regardless of the technology, regardless of the changes out there and the solutions. We know that contracting still flows in a pretty consistent manner across every company, regardless of size, shape, industry, geography, everything. Contracts have a life cycle. That's where CLM, contract lifecycle management, got its name. Traditional CLM companies, we're really looking at what we call, I'm going to go back and forth here for a second, and you have all these slides also available to you all for download, but these end-to-end concept, you might have heard that. When we think about end-to-end and CLM, it's really trying to automate all of the life cycle, the entire life cycle of contracting, to be automated through a CLM platform. Platform is kind of a good way to think about it, because it is very infrastructural, it is operational, it is CLM technologies intended to take you from the very beginnings and early stages of contracting, which in our perspective is that request, that first request that comes from the business to the legal team, all the way through the creation, the negotiation, the storage, all the steps. So CLM technologies end-to-end traditionally have been very operational and infrastructural. As tech evolved, there was more focus, of course, on what you can do inside the four corners of the document. Traditionally, even, we've known about clause libraries and we've known about template management, but that was still done in a pretty infrastructural way. You had templates, you had clauses, they were stored in places. You thought of them, you wrote them up somewhere, usually in a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, and then you kind of stored them in a CLM system. Well, AI is what really has changed that aspect of contracting automation, and where we see AI having the biggest impact is in that negotiation phase, and then in the store and manage. I'll tackle store and manage a bit, and then I'll hand it off to Laura to tell us a little bit about what we're discovering for that negotiation area. Store and manage is actually one of the easiest to understand, frankly, which is why I'm going to tackle it. I'll let Laura do the harder stuff. But in the storage of contracts and managing post-signature, we all know we can't find information. Sorry, that is just, it's okay. We're here amongst friends, and that's the therapy that we're all here to share. You're not alone. Finding contracts is still the #1 problem, and AI is making leaps and bounds at being able to scan your existing cloud-based storage mechanisms. Cloud-based, they can get to your C drive as well, but that's a different journey. But really, if you have contracts in Box, Dropbox, Salesforce, any cloud-based system, AI is doing a really good job of being able to scan and access those and extract key data terms. Key data terms. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of nuance. You have to comprehend the real impacts of a cap on a liability and an indemnity provision and how they play together with the insurance section. We know we still need to do our critical thinking, but that ability to find your contracts and then be able to parse out some key terms. AI's had a really big kind of a leapfrogging effect on the traditional CLM systems. And many of the CLM systems, let me rephrase, I'm going to venture to say all, and we rarely say all or never in our business, but I would say almost all CLM platforms right now are desperately trying to bring AI into their solution and or have brought some version of it, or frankly, they're acquiring smaller AI providers, which has popped up onto the market in literally the last handful of years. So negotiation is the next one that I'm going to just hand off to you, Laura, to talk about what's happening there with AI and where does it fit in.
Yeah, I think for anybody who is familiar with traditional uses of CLM systems for the negotiation or reviewing and redlining, exchanging of drafts part of the contracting process, it's always been one of the weaknesses, in my opinion, because most of the time it comes out of the system. So it's all, exchanged by email into Word, back into other formats. What we've seen really come into the fore with the advanced AI capabilities is the ability to generate that first pass review based on your playbooks and clause libraries and do a pretty good job of getting it right. There is a whole discussion to be had on how one sets up those playbooks and rules to make it successful, but the ability to use those rules and really rapidly do a first pass review that is reliable is something that has really, really been quite a shift for the positive in the last couple of months. Couple with that, generative AI capability. So beyond your playbook, the ability for AI to go out either into your universe or beyond that and bring back suggestions that, of course, have to be validated, is also something we had not been able to rely on any great capacity, and that is getting stronger and more user friendly, and just really something that we've seen advance quite rapidly. So that is also something, like I said, the traditional players, as Lucy said, are scrambling to ramp up and add in and do as well as they can. But we've seen those point solutions really come out swinging in that space because it's something that's really useful on an individual user basis to have your little toolkit handy within Word or wherever you work.
Yes. Well, so that's, to orient everybody again, we think it is always a good practice. You'll see it over and over. We talk about that life cycle. Here's the circular view. And then earlier I was showing you kind of the chevron view. The point is being very, very focused on where it is you hope automation is going to come in kind of to the rescue is critical. So, picking the right solution really comes down to being able to crisply articulate that pain point and the problem that you're trying to solve. And I will say that is not a new concept, to be clear. That is kind of the age old of, you really need to go get your processes squared away and identify your pain point before seeking technology. With that, we do have a question that came in. Before we jump into our next session, I would love to talk about where do we have any specific analysis about the different systems. We don't publish any analysis about the systems. It's so nuanced to every buyer, I will say. All of the systems in one way start to look the same. And maybe not all. There's the end-to-end CLM groupings. They start to feel the same. And then these AI redlining solutions. You might hear AI redlining, AI playbooks, AI negotiation, those combinations of words. Also contract intelligence. You're going to hear those words being thrown out as well. And I should say those are being used and thrown out by the vendors. These are the sellers of these of these solutions, and they are trying to find ways to articulate their value proposition. Right now, because the market is not cleanly and neatly defined into categories, you're going to hear a variety of concepts being used. So our job is to help identify the right technologies for the particular pain points of a particular entity within its culture, its history, its existing resources, meaning the humans, its policies, templates, and playbooks, the extent of that pre-existing combination of people and processes and templates and artifacts and policies and all the things that exist, and then to bring in the technology. And it really does have to, that is how we look at it. Yes, it is a little bit, I'm going to say it's not the sexiest part for most people when they're excited about technology. The sexiest part is not to say, well, hold on, but are you ready for this technology? Or not hold on, but based on what you have, here's the right technology for you. The reality is there are going to be some companies that could be similarly situated in size and even industry and even resources who have a very different level of readiness. Our advice on the type of technology that they could use will be different, even though their pain points can be similar and other attributes or characteristics are similar. The readiness in order to really embrace technology is key. So the short answer to the question is we do not publish our opinions on the systems or analysis on them, but we're always happy to have a side chat. So if you reach out to us, we can give you some quick off-the-cuff thoughts, but always subject to our disclaimers, because we are lawyers after all. So let's jump into readiness for a bit here. And this is definitely the part that is the, eating your vegetables before we can go to ice cream and cake. We cannot overstate the importance of readiness. And by readiness is all that other stuff that is outside of the technology that will actually make the technology valuable to you. We see a gross understatement or underestimation of the amount of energy and time that it takes to actually get ready to optimize on technologies, especially if you're looking for end-to-end, more robust, holistic lifecycle management systems. Those actually, I would say, require probably the biggest amount of readiness. The AI solutions, actually, we can probably jump into a little bit quicker, and you'll probably get a little bit more value from AI quicker than you will get from kind of an end-to-end life cycle system. So what we hear from our clients is that they likely either have a system in place that they are not happy with, and when we work with them, we realize, oh, you got that system before you had done some of that pre-work. That's okay. Let's do that work now and kind of back you into your system. Or it is a company who doesn't have any technology for contracting in place, and they are ready and they want to buy something. And when we ask them some foundational questions, great. Do you know where your contracts are today? Are you able to identify them, find them? No, that's why we need a system. Okay, what else do you want the system to do? Well, we want it to be able to route contracts across efficiently. We want to monitor. Okay, great. Do you have an approval matrix? Are you clear on how contracts should be routed? Are you clear on when and how legal should play a role? Then we start discovering that the answers are kind of in their heads oftentimes. Well, kind of, yeah, mostly we think we know. And those are the things that tell us, those are the indicators that say, okay, we probably need to do a little bit more readiness work. Think of readiness as really just preparing for attack. I'm going to try to make it also as relatable as possible. We always say, those of us who have an Uber app on our phone, even with an Uber app, you kind of have to know where are you going to go. You kind of have to know where you are coming from. It may not always find the exact entrance to the hotel. If it's a big hotel, you're going to end up on the other block if you're in Vegas trying to pick up an Uber. So understanding some of these kind of basic things before you're able to benefit from the tool is very much critical in the CLM space, and even more so. Go ahead, Laura.
I also wanted to say that we're seeing the reality of that you need to sort of run dual project tracks at the moment. So most organizations and most of our clients have the dual reality of needing to think about and prepare for CLM projects or contract automation initiatives that focus on the fundamentals of contracting that may be messy, need improvement, need replacement, at the same time as being pulled into organization-wide AI initiatives that require legal's participation. So although we're trying to think about it sort of methodically and neatly in boxes, how do we stand up a contracting program in the most lovely way that future-proofs you against all technology changes because you know your why very clearly and the who's and the hows? We do acknowledge that while we're thinking about preparation and readiness, there are definitely dual tracks and requirements for legal at the moment. So we're not saying, you should think about these things as just exploring the art of the possible with all the things that are out there in smaller and articulate use cases in a similar, maybe more light touch way. But the intersection between these realities is very important to acknowledge. What am I trying to achieve on the one hand in support of future-looking AI initiatives, at the same time as how am I repairing and building my foundations or choosing CLM systems and setting them up so that all of these things in the contract automation bucket ultimately are considered together. And these foundational documents do, of course, play a role in all of that. But we're not necessarily suggesting anymore, which we may have a couple of years ago, that you have to stop completely to get ready. I think we have to acknowledge there are dual tracks happening at all times for almost everybody.
Yeah. And that's a fantastic theme in general to take through everything. There is no stop and do it right. There just isn't. You're always building the plane and flying it at the same time, and we completely appreciate that that's a reality. We also know there's realities of how people do work, how legal teams do work, how the business does or doesn't engage with legal. Those are all realities that the technology has to support, has to enable, has to make it better, but the technology will not change it. So during this readiness and design kind of phase or group of work that does need to happen, it is very important to understand your current practices. You really do have to get a good sense of how things are working today, because another secret here is that 90% of all of this is change management. To make any tech successful, understanding where you're coming from and where you're going to, understanding that change and that delta becomes the secret sauce to a successful technology implementation. So during the readiness and design, you're also thinking about some of the cultural aspects, some of the historical experiences people have had with different technologies. You're certainly appreciating the pressure to use AI that is coming down from the C-suite, certainly from the C-suite looking at the CLO, hey, what's legal doing? You know, all of that. It's just understanding that you're not just buying a screwdriver that you're going to put into a toolbox and use it when you need. It's critical, and I think taking the time to understand where you're coming from and where you're going is key. We also have here business self-service as kind of this other quiet, critical thing to consider is when you're trying to automate, to understand, are you automating for the purpose of enabling the business, or are you automating to make the legal team function more efficiently? Assuming most of you who are joining are from the legal department. Those are quite different approaches as well. Usability within a legal team of professionals who understand what goes on inside the four corners of the document and can use technology in a way to be more efficient for their part of the job is going to be a different, tech goal, tech needs, than for the business to be able to handle certain aspects of contracting on their own. And so understanding that when you're getting the tool for legal versus the business, that should be all part of this big picture that you are trying to paint as you go out to market to look for technology. Along with that, understanding in your current state what you have today. Laura, should we do a little public service announcement about integrations, the excitability, the reality, where the two do or don't interact?
Sure. So, I mean, integrations is one of my pet topics to talk about because you can love and hate it in equal measure, depending. For anyone who's been through it in any real detail will know what I mean. I think the thing we want to communicate most heavily here is knowing your tech stack as part of your understanding what you want is so critical, because integrations can make or break the idea of a seamless contracting system for you. The idea for everybody is have a way to easily get your contracts done and get data out of it. And that's the short story. And so integration is key to that. So you'll see there that there are various ways in the middle in what we consider the CLM bucket, pieces of technology that can do all the things, but where they're taking data from and pushing it to, how it fits in the overall tech stack is so important, because the integration piece is something that is not super well articulated or focused on by vendors, usually in demos, because they know how big and hairy it can be. It's usually resource intensive for you and comes at additional cost. If you have an out-the-box integration capability like Salesforce, sure, there are ways to do that lightly and easily. But if there are custom tools, bespoke tools, multi-layer tools that require custom design and implementation and maintenance, it can have an outsized impact on what you think you're picking up. And that is why sometimes it doesn't really make sense necessarily to integrate everything, although the idea of the seamless universe is the ideal goal. You have to really understand it properly and where every tool plays and whether you really, really need those integrations to the fullest extent to make it valuable. So it's really just another sense check level on that current state. What do you have? What do you want? And what do you really need in those when it comes to your tech stack? And so just knowing that is helpful as you go ahead.
Perfect. So you mentioned earlier, know your why, which I know we keep kind of hammering, understanding your pain point, understanding what you're trying to accomplish. A little bit though, what we do want to talk about also is, the the purpose of the tech, right? So knowing the why is often it could be pretty broad, right? We need to be more efficient. The business is frustrated with how long things take. We don't have enough resources, right? We can't get any more lawyers on staff. There's all these kind of reasons. We've heard reasons as broad as our contracts are a mess. We're a mess, hell, we need to buy tech. And we're like, there's some gaps. There's some gaps in between that problem statement and the ability to effectively select technology. So for us, there's a pretty clear approach to this. To get an ROI, you have to be able to measure something. Oftentimes, measuring time savings is your best bet. This is especially in those situations where the legal department perhaps is in the position of trying to convince the CFO to provide some budget, and they really can't articulate that if we spend X, we'll save Y in terms of dollars. There's some formulaic ways to do it. You're going to have to use a little bit of creativity. I've done the painful task of not tracking time, but certainly interviewing lawyers around our department when I was in-house at Microsoft to just understand how long our contract's taking them. It's a casual conversation. It's very well worth it if you're having trouble getting budget to really translate lawyer time into dollars. It's expensive. Lawyers are expensive internal resources, and that makes usually a pretty good pitch. Obviously, deal velocity, speed to closure. If you can create any kind of measurable, success measures, that's a really great way to get there. We do have one really dedicated ugly slide. Sorry, I turned that into a new word for the know your budget and costs. And Laura, we don't have that slide here. It is something that we can certainly share with people if they reach out to us. We have contact information at the end. But knowing your budgets and other costs. Laura, you've got so many cautionary tales. What does it cost to buy a system? Please, take it away.
First of all, just a note on ROI. We found that the biggest cautionary tale of ROI measurements is pretending you know when you don't. So if you cannot or have not enabled yourself to have measurable metrics to measure against, think about your value and success criteria and cultural things. Again, there's alignment with overall initiatives. This AI movement has given a lot of people a golden ticket to the front of the tech queues and table strategic conversations. So if you can't do it in measurable metrics, try do it in terms of how we're aligning with overall strategies and values. And that's something that can also deliver value. It's hard at the moment because we don't really have the data we needed because we have a tsunami of things that are measured differently now. So that's my PSA on ROIs. As far as budgeting for technology goes, it's just an eyes wide open approach. You often go in to ask for things without fully understanding them. The cost that the vendors give you, the cost estimate, is just usually their licensing fees. Sometimes there are implementation costs. How you measure what that implementation covers is often hard to know. There are also things like migration costs. The vendors will typically not help you, and their AI will not auto-magically be able to clean up everything you have and create parent-child relationships effectively. Again, we mentioned integrations as something that might be bespoke and heavy. And the overall readiness bucket, that current state analysis, understanding the what you have, the why you have it, what you want, that future state mapping, that is all the work that's going to help make sure that when you ultimately go and ask for budget for something, you actually know what you're asking for as a package of goods. There is, the cost of acquisition, there's those once-off costs, and there's the cost of ownership that goes on. And those categories of costs need to be well articulated so that you get the right buy-in and you maintain your credibility, because we see far too often mid-project somebody going to ask for more because they just haven't resourced correctly. They don't have what they need to stand the system up, not even just initially, but on an ongoing basis. So those phases, the what's, the whys, it's just helpful. It's not fun work necessarily. It's where we do our work because not many people have the time or capacity to do it. But really just making sure you're crisp on all the bits and pieces that go into the bucket will really maintain that buy-in and credibility in the long term, and hopefully have a budget that's viable as well.
And Laura, can I ask you this? I know, is it fair to say that it can be a very disproportionate cost that the solution itself, especially the newer, fresher, young kind of AI solutions, and we'll get to tech selection in just 2 minutes, I promise. Is it fair to say, though, that even the smaller, less expensive solutions can be just as costly around getting it up and running some of the more expensive, robust solutions in terms of integration, data migration. Oh, we're living
I
that.
think that's completely accurate. Well, usually if anybody who's been around this in any capacity, not just for CLM, but SaaS generally, the implementation fees are usually an outsized fee compared to the licensing or ongoing fees. Like I said, that total cost of acquisition versus ownership, and sometimes implementation, for example, is provided by vendors, but to a like degree. And there's usually a whole lot of costs that go on around that are required for a successful implementation. And those costs are typically larger and disproportionate to the ongoing maintenance of a system. Why? All vendors price things differently. They will do pretty much anything to get deals over a line. And a lot of costs are sort of not hidden, but not super well articulated. Oh, you like that? It's an add-on. Or you want to scale up? There's more. You want to put more documents in? It's more. And that's why if you don't know your universe well, it's really hard to get an accurate measurement. And there are no apple for apples comparison for vendors because they keep it mysterious on purpose, in my opinion, so that there is a negotiation to be had, all the different licensing models, but just knowing that you are not blindsided by the things that go on alongside that system fee that seems smaller in proportion, but the implementation package is often larger and involves resources sometimes within or beyond or in addition to vendors and in-house. So how you do that, who you do that with, is just something to be aware of and worth its weight in gold, because once you stand it up well, it is possible for ongoing fees to be far more reasonable if you enter into a reasonable maintenance and ongoing, optimization phase.
Yep, for sure. Okay, well, we're here now to dig into so how do you pick? So we talked all about the broccoli, the vegetables, the salad, all that stuff, and now we really need to get to the dessert. Okay, build versus buy, that's a common question, and build looks completely different than it did, again, 5+ years ago, where build implied you needed a lot of technical support, whether it's your internal tech department, your IT team, or you were engaging tech consultants. They were actually building. They were coding. They were creating custom things. Those custom things then got a little clunky. They required a lot of hands-on ongoing maintenance. They were very not user-friendly in terms of self-servicing the tool, like when it broke or when something happened or a button didn't work. Very little you could do on your own without tech support. Those days of build are largely disappearing, and disappearing quickly. For those who follow on LinkedIn, various topics around legal tech, you're hearing vibe coding. You're sure lawyers are sharing their prompts. Lawyers are sharing very long prompts. The lawyers are sharing their favorite tips and tricks on how to use AI. That is the new world. We are not here to help with the FOMO craze. There is definitely a FOMO craze, but it is here, and it is here to stay. So figuring out your approach is going to be very important, and just starting. I will say you just kind of also have to start playing with AI specifically. This is where we see the big kind of separation of CLM technology and these AI first, AI native solutions. You can start very quickly to work with AI. And actually, I'm going to venture to say at this point, I think you all have, and I'm going to hope you all have for sure. You at this point have to be using AI, hopefully knowingly. If not, you could be using it unknowingly, but we want you to be really more engaged in how you're using it. First and foremost, let's think about AI in a couple of buckets, at least when it comes to legal work, to our day jobs. How can we be using AI, and how do we get comfortable with understanding what it is we're using, and why, and where some of these different solutions fit, especially the ones you're hearing a lot about. So first, let's start with, at the highest level, the parts of your day job that are common to other professionals, other general professional productivity tasks. We write a lot of emails, we have to follow up on meetings, we need to take notes, all of that stuff. We have to research before we go to a meeting, we have to get ready. That is where we think there's been a wonderful explosion of options, and we're going to call this general your AI generalists. They are the tools that you think about, know about all the time. Your kids probably talk to you about them, probably your parents, your neighbors, your milkman. Everybody is talking about AI. We have a couple here. Again, we aren't endorsing anyone over the other. We've used a little bit of everything, and that's our job. We try, but again, the speed of innovation is absolutely unprecedented, and it's only going to be faster. It is as slow as it ever will be today. Tomorrow will be faster, or some concept like that I heard that I thought was brilliant. Some of the ones that, obviously you heard about, we've listed their logos here, Copilot, OpenAI, of course. One warning of caution here. First of all, yes, use them. Absolutely. If you aren't using them for work today, start, but please use a licensed version. Do not upload any of your materials, any of your company confidential information, or any of your contracts into any of the free versions of these. They all have free versions. You can go right now today, go there if you want to plan a trip, write a poem, draft an uncomfortable email to your in-laws. All of that is fantastic on the free version. If you're going to use it for any work-related tasks, please buy one of these licenses. Even just buy a personal one if your company is slow on getting an enterprise license. Most companies by now should have enterprise licenses to one of these at least. If you're a Microsoft shop, it's very likely you have a Copilot license. That might be an easier place to start because it lives inside of your workspace. If you don't love your Microsoft workspace or you have other thoughts, certainly there's other options. So I will stop there with that public service announcement. But if you aren't already using AI for some of these tasks, you absolutely should. That is where the FOMO is real. People are getting faster and better at their jobs with this. And there will be a competitive advantage that they have. And that is why we're here to say AI is not going to replace you. It will replace the lawyers who aren't using AI, though. So those are the generalists. And we should all get familiar with some of these key names and players. One layer in, one layer deeper are going to be the legal AI tools. And these are also, I'm going to say, legal generalist tools, meaning these companies are not specific to any one particular area of legal work. None of them are really coming out to say we are experts on litigation, or we are experts in patents, or experts in employment law. They're not taking a vertical approach yet to legal, because we think things are coming, but they are taking a legal generalist approach. They have added a layer on top of either one, a few, or all of the solutions that are in that general LLM bucket. That's why I should have used the term general LLMs. Those are the names on the far left of the general business tasks bucket. The ones in the middle have applied a layer on top. And it is a layer of two combinations of things. One is there's some coding. There is some technical coding that is built that extracts and connects into the general LLM companies. In addition, there is some very, very deep level of prompting and instruction that has been written and baked into these legal AI specialist providers. They are making extremely fantastic progress. They are making their way into law firms very quickly, especially Harvey, very deeply in law firms, Legora coming in from outside the US, coming into law firms, and they're already jumping into in-house teams. But those two were first kind of law firms, and now you're probably seeing them more in-house. GCAI was built for general counsels. So that has very much a general counsel angle and approach. And then co-counsel, similarly, I think a lot of focus there was for in-house, if I recall correctly. The point is these solutions are now going in both directions. They are here to help lawyers do their job. So they've gone that layer deeper. Now, if you put a contract for review into one of the generalist tools like Copilot, it'll give you fairly decent results. Frankly, pretty good results on a standard NDA if you're trying to negotiate and get some tips on some non-standard clauses there. That next layer will do a better job. They have been trained to think like lawyers. They've been trained to think about contracts differently. Contracts, by the way, are the top use case for all of those in the middle. Top use case. Frankly, even the generalists are out there saying, hey, upload your contracts. They're talking to the general users, not even the legal professionals. But hey, everybody has contracts. Have you ever read the contract that a plumber gives you for a big job? They're complicated. But that middle box is really where we want you all to focus on exploring if you want to really leapfrog and get immediate efficiencies. Some of these middle kind of legal solutions are fantastic, and they cover a broad range, by the way, of skills, so not just in the contracting space. And now we're going to go one step deeper, and that is really the topic of where we are, which is that integration of CLM, AI, contracting, automation. We've listed the other examples of some of the specialized domains we're seeing tools pop up in, but for us here, we really want to talk about contracts and contracting, and there's really too many to list, as we've mentioned before. So how do you tackle it? Let's assume you've done all the things that we have kind of warned about and cautioned of the readiness and the prep, and you've been very crisp and clear. You're pretty sure you need some combination of, this document says CLM, system requirements on the screenshot. It's CLM plus AI. But Laura, I know this is your sweet spot. You live and breathe this every day with our clients. So tell us a little bit about the requirements gathering exercise and why everybody needs one.
I think we spent some time on this earlier saying if you don't know your current state, you can't shop effectively for technology, nor can you get the proper buy-in, nor can you, push forward change management initiatives in a meaningful way, because if you have not established and documented things well, you won't be able to do what you need to. So this is a snapshot of the technical contract automation requirements that we like to gather and then prioritize based on a client-specific context. Now, this is a broad brush example of some of the things you might want to, we gather, we talk, we put together, and we validate every part of the life cycle that we talked about, all the stages of contracting life cycle from a technology functions and features perspective, but we also go layers deeper, which is integrations, customer support, security layers, and things like that, because we know what the package of goods looks like that you need to know about in order to be able to go effectively select technology and justify your purchases. Having said that, I just want to be very clear in all the madness and all these millions of systems, we have yet to find the perfect system that does everything, which is why the prioritization column is probably more important than the endless lines of features and functions, because you cannot solve everything for everyone in one go and in one place, especially for larger enterprises. The one system to rule them all idea is really just not something we've seen work super well at scale. So that's why being very clear on your use case and the priority pain points you're trying to solve is probably the most helpful thing that a requirements document like this can illustrate to everybody. When they say, it didn't do this, you say, that's okay. It wasn't a high priority and we couldn't do everything, and that's okay. So just that sort of ace in your pocket that you're able to point at every time you go and try to shop for contract automation.
Sure. And is it safe to say that we don't go out shopping for AI? You don't need to shop for AI. You need to shop for solutions to the pain points, prioritize on a list of the top things you want to solve. And I will guarantee you that all the solutions you're looking at will have an AI element to it. So ask it once you're looking there if you're interested, but it's really no different than saying, I really need to get to the grocery store. I need some sort of a vehicle. I'm going to go shop for an engine because I want to get there really fast. Well, you kind of need to shop for the whole car. The problem is getting to the store. So let's talk about, do you even need a car? Do you need a motorcycle or a scooter?
Correct.
But Laura, you live in, of course, in these right now, live time with at least two clients in parallel. Maybe a little kind of case study perspective of in real life, what happens through this and what's the value of an RFP versus some of the challenges an RFP might create?
So I think that there has got to be, usually between research stage on this, that current state analysis, creating that requirements document, we break it down specifically because there are possibilities for automation at every stage of the life cycle. Again, we go back to the fact that may be achieved in one system or multiple systems. That's why we break it down, so you have a visible snapshot of what you're trying to solve. And then you can make decisions about how you want to solve it. And on those scorecards and during those exercises, we figure out things like resourcing. Do you have tech support? Can you handle integrations? Because that also has an implication for what you're going out to ask for. When we think about issuing an RFP to vendors, it's sometimes helpful, as long as you are clear again on what your priority questions are and the data you really need to validate. We all know that 99.9% of the time, a vendor's answer to a question will be, yes, we can do it. The devil's in the detail of how, and not many people are well equipped or know their scoped project well enough to dig into it meaningfully. So I would just caution that while you're gathering and while you have your requirements and while you're issuing RFPs, you really, really focus on those priorities and know your context well enough to poke and prod a little bit more with some deeper questions in the areas that matter most to you, and we'll have those big levers on costing, resourcing, timing, and really what it does solve. And from the AI perspective, like I said, in those scorecards, AI is assumed under contract automation. You can't see it here, but like when we get, it's just a snapshot, but like now negotiate phase, we have table stakes, negotiation requirements, which we've seen. Can it integrate with Word? Can I email it? Can I version control? And then we have an entirely separate section for what we know we could possibly expect from AI redlining now, and that may be achieved in one tool or multiple. So again, just prioritizing what you need and making sure those RFPs align with your priority requirements and not trying to solve for absolutely everything. I think that is really what we've learned. There is a very big mismatch between the broad yes and the reality of your context, and just knowing enough to be able to dig in.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you also, there's something that I realized probably we didn't highlight as much as we should have on this, the methodical selection timeline, but somewhere in this, during the scorecard, using the scorecard is usually during the demos. Between the demos and making a final decision, tell us a little bit about piloting or sandbox, or what really can people ask for these days that's reasonable, and what should we expect for vendors when their response? Because we've heard some crazy responses.
So on one side you have the vendors, on the other side you obviously have your stakeholder mix, and that is why when there was a question that said, which system should I choose? And it really comes down to making sure that the right stakeholders get their hands on a version of the system. Not necessarily, most of these systems can do what they say. Well, they can do what they say they can do to some degree. And so with the right design, you can make them work. But you have to manage expectations in a tangible and practical way and validate and document all these things so that you make sure that when you articulate this choice and when you push it out, you A, understand, but B, have gotten this continuous validation and buy-in throughout the process. So which is why we think, funneling down to a final 3, ideally 2 vendors is really, really helpful. And then we usually say, well, which is your front runner? Have a sandbox for a week, pick your primary workflow use case, use some dummy documents, and then really put it through its paces. You won't be able to do everything because the sandbox isn't fully integrated. It doesn't know your context, it has to be set up specifically for you. But if, for example, self-service contracting is the thing you're trying to solve, you know what you need and for whom very well. So really just spend some time clicking around and making sure it feels the way that you want it to and asking those targeted questions. It's much easier in a context-specific way to validate than these broad strokes at a high level. It's very overwhelming to look at a sheet like this, we realize, and make a decision on this basis. But with a sandbox, you can take those high priorities, show them to a vendor, say, build according to this, and I want you to take me through a validation exercise, or we'll do it ourselves, depending, that validates that the priorities on this list can be done in your system in a way that makes me feel good about it and confident about it. So always hands on the system if you can. Proof of concepts and pilots, depending on whether it comes with a cost. Piloting is hard because it's usually pretty much implementation for a fee that assumes like an ongoing relationship. So it's usually like the next stage potentially, but I would say sandbox first all the way.
Yep. And we've heard also a couple of things, just to give some relativity on what makes sense and what doesn't, and what's reasonable in the market. We've had client who wanted 4 months of sandboxing. 4 months. That is too much. That's not a reasonable request. Sorry. And then we've got those who, of course, never ask And we're like, no, you can ask. Laura, you mentioned 1 week, 2 weeks. I think those are reasonable for sandbox time, for sure. So, again, these are relationships you're building. And that's another reason why it's very hard for us to ever give a black and white answer without context on our favorite systems or the tools we love, because a lot of it does come down to also the customer support that the vendor provides, right? The people behind the scenes, their implementation approach, how open are they to, flexibility and working with their customers. So there's a lot that goes into it besides just the tools. At this point, I would say if you have down selected to a handful of tools, they better have great tech. Those, not because of you, meaning you better have picked the right ones, but meaning at this point, any players in the game have no excuse for half-baked technology. They really should be presenting things that are working, and that it should be table stakes. And we should have, as buyers, we putting our hats on with you, should have the perspective that the tech still won't be perfect, but it should be working as expected, right? It shouldn't surprise you, but the answers may still not be perfect because, hey, guess what? Especially with AI, just like humans, there will be mistakes, there will be misunderstandings, and we need to have as much, if not more, acceptance for those mistakes that, like we do with humans when we're training on new resources. So we have, we actually just have one more thing to kind of share as to setting some perspective, setting expectations of timing on these things. And then we'll close with a couple of minutes if anybody has any more questions to pop into the chat. We do wanted to share this to set some perspective here. People want things to happen very, very fast, and we understand that. And while the tech is evolving very fast and is available very quickly, again, being pragmatic about what it takes to bring a system on board, what it takes to prepare for ongoing operations is critical. So, you should always expect a solid 2 to 3 months minimum to kind of understand your current state, get your priorities neatly and clearly defined, and then possibly even get through that selection process in about 3-ish months, I would say. So at a minimum, this is a 4-month view where all that prep work really gets you going live at about 4 months. This is on I would say one use case, one type of workflow, one type of contract. Something very important we didn't get into deeply is managing an implementation timeline that has phases is very important. So the go live star here is probably one type of a contract, or maybe 2 to 3 workflows of a type of a contract. So think sales agreement, maybe 3 workflows of a sales agreement if you're looking for that end-to-end. Going live with just a pure AI, redlining tool, that's faster. It'll take you still about 2 months to test it, to make sure you're getting the right results. It'll be faster to go live with just that pure one particular point case solution AI system than it will with a CLM, fuller system. So just wanted to set some expectations for you all, because we've heard all kinds of disappointments, and we don't want people to be disappointed when they're out shopping for technology. Additional resources on our website just in these last 2 minutes. And again, really happy to answer any questions if anybody wants to jump into the Q&A box. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to give some off-the-cuff thoughts, but we will have plenty of provisos with those. We also have plenty of resources on our website available for you for download. We really take a very holistic approach to contracting automation, contracting improvements. We feel like that's really the only way to be successful, is understanding the people, the process, the policies, and the technology, and how they all work together. With that, I think I am at my last minute, and I'll turn it back to our host, Walter Kluwer.
There was a question in the chat.
There is. Is there a new question? Why am I not seeing it? Yes, most of your clients look primarily to implement the AI functionality of their existing CLM provider. Fantastic questions. Most who have a CLM system that they're mostly happy with, yes, they're trying to really extract as much value from the AI functionality that their system should have. The reality is that if the system's been around a longer time, they're having a tough time keeping up, and many are now supplementing with the AI native point solutions while still keeping their CLM system. So the short answer is they're trying to embrace that AI functionality, but some are falling short and they're having to supplement? Great question. All right, I'll turn it back to our hosts, I think, to close out. Kim, I
Thank
think
you,
that is
Lucy.
your...
Excellent content. Thank you all for joining us. The webinar is now complete. To obtain a recording of the event, the link you received to log in today will be the same link you use for a playback of the webinar at a future date. Thank you for joining us again, and we hope to see you in another webinar soon.